So, Blue Mage. A class that few people play and fewer still understand. An acquired taste that quickly became one of my favorite things to do in FF14. Blue Mage has a lot of spells, 124 of them to be exact. And while some of them are amazing, a decent chunk of them are, well, hot garbage. And so, as a blue savage raider with no worlds left to conquer, and one of the few people still stupid enough to be playing 14 in spite of everything, I figured, why not, for fun, make a little tier list ranking almost every single spell Blue Mage has, in an effort to point aspiring Seekers of the Azure in the right direction. So, without further ado, let's fiddle while Rome burns, shall we? Alright, so here we have almost every blue spell. The only ones that I will not be ranking are Mighty Guard, which is mandatory for tanks, and Etheric Mimicry and Angel Whisper, which are mandatory for everyone. I'll still be ranking the other required spells, though, because you can still technically tank without Dragon Force, can still technically heal without Stotrum or Palm Cure, etc. I'll just go ahead and explain these tiers right quick. So first off, always useful. Once you have the spell, it stays on your bar forever, either for a single roll or for all three with very, very few exceptions. Sometimes useful. These spells are still good spells to use, but they'll be the ones that you'll be swapping out for better stuff as the situation permits, or if you need something else for utility. Rarely useful. These spells they fill a small niche, and they shouldn't be used regularly. They're either gimmicks, or just have lackluster effects that make them, well, rarely useful. Carnivale fodder. These spells are only useful for specific stages of the Masked Carnivale. They're completely useless in normal play. And useless. These spells are irredeemably bad and should not be used under basically any circumstance. Now keep in mind that while I have done every single Blue Mage Savage raid, and my log completion is sitting at 120 out of 122 at the time of recording, I have not done many Blue Extreme fights because, well, there just isn't much of a point in doing them in my eyes. I don't really care about the achievements that much. So if any spells I list off has some niche usage in some random extreme fight I don't know about, that likely still won't save them from their placement anyway. I'm also going to be ranking them based on the current standard of spells, meaning that spells that were amazing when they came out but have since been made obsolete will be rated more negatively as a result. We'll be going through most of these in numerical order, but these two I already have on the board here are the exceptions, as the single best and worst spells by leaps and bounds, and it's not even close, and I'll explain why in a minute. Alright, first off, so what is undeniably the best spell that Blue Mage has at the moment, and it's not even close? Ultravibration, a spell gotten off of a level 60-something overworld mob from Stormblood. And what do you get for that Herculean task? Well, you get a spell that one-shots all frozen and petrified enemies. No check, no save, no level requirement. They are just dead. To the point where everybody can bring it, and you can completely just turn off trash in the vast majority of dungeons. Now, granted, there are some dungeons, a very small amount of them, where some enemies are immune to being frozen. But those are such a tiny minority that it isn't even worth bringing up, honestly. I mean, you look at dungeons like Holminster Switch and Barnum's Meadow, where all of the difficulty from them comes from the trash, where the bosses are brain dead easy. And this effectively just turns that off. Makes Holminster Switch as easy as fricking Sastasha. So, if you are of the level to get this spell, you want to always bring it to any dungeon. Now, obviously, that makes it so it is not very useful at all in raids, trials, etc., because enemies in those don't freeze. But, considering how most of the Blue Mage log is dungeons, most of the spells are acquired from dungeons, most of basically all you'll be doing on Blue Mage for the vast majority, unless you go into higher level stuff, is going to be dungeons. This spell basically just turns off an entire section of those dungeons and allows you to just walk through. Honestly, it was kind of an overcorrection from Blue Mage Tank in the beginning, because Blue Mage Tank was very rough in the beginning, at least how I heard. I didn't start playing until Shadowbringers, but only having Mighty Guard, not having Chelonian Gate, not having Dragon Force, basically your only mitigation being Diamondback, doesn't sound very fun. And so you freeze the enemies and you kill them. So now you don't have to worry about mitigation at all as a Blue Mage tank apart from bosses. Cool. And that's obviously why it's the best, why it's all the way up here, why, unless we get another spell that just kills everything nearby without a check, without a save, without a level requirement, etc., with no frozen or petrified requirement, it's going to remain the top uncontested Blue Mage spell for a while. And the inverse of that, of course, is this little stinker down here, Transfusion. Now, for the longest time, I thought this spell was a res. I didn't read the tooltip that much, but when I first saw this spell, I thought, okay, So it's pretty bad, but you can at least make an argument for the healer goes down and the boss is about to die and you don't want to have to do this trial again to get all the idiots who kept getting themselves killed the spell. So okay, you sacrifice yourself, the guy who already has the spell, you get that newbie back up, you don't have to worry about doing the fight again. And so one time I decided to try it. I brought it along to Eden Prime, and somebody got themselves killed for the 5th time to pure light, and I said, okay, great, time for transfusions, time to shine. So I walk over to them, try to cast the spell. Oh, it's not working. Maybe it has a tiny range. Still nothing. And so I stand there for a moment, I read the tooltip, and my eyes just go wide. This spell is a benediction that kills you. That's all it is, without exaggeration. All this spell does is it brings you to full health and full MP, well, somebody else to full health and full MP, and it kills the caster. Not only kills the caster, meaning that someone else will then have to res them, but also it afflicts them with Brush of Death, the same debuff that you'll get from Final Sting and Self-Destruct, meaning that once you use this, you cannot use either of those spells for the next 10 minutes. I mean, can you imagine playing White Mage if Benediction killed you every time you use it? That's about how this spell works. Oh my god, I mean, this spell genuinely boggles the mind with its mere presence. How anybody at any stage of the planning and coding process could think that this effect was acceptable for a spell. All it does is heal somebody to full. You know what else heals somebody else to full? White Wind, and everybody else in the party along with them. And it doesn't kill you. Seriously, if they gave this like a huge mana cost, that would at least be something. Like if it costed 5,000, 6,000 MP, something to that effect, you could at least make an argument for it. But no, it just kills you. And for that reason, it is far and away the worst spell that Blue Mage has by leaps and bounds. If you use this at any point, even as a joke, your party members are going to look at you like a goddamn lunatic, and they should. Good God, transfusion. Moving on from that shit show, though, we of course have the starting spell, Water Cannon. Now, back in the day, this spell was probably pretty good, honestly. 200 potency, single target. You get it for free. You get what you pay for. But these days, not so much. Compared to some of the other single target spam spells that we'll get to later, this spell, it's not too crazy amazing, honestly. The damage is lacking. It has the normal cast time. Compared to some of the other stuff, it's just not really worth using anymore. I mean, fuck it, we'll just stick it here. Again, we're going based off of the current standing of spells, so if a spell was amazing back in Realm Reborn, but nowadays it's crap, then it will be crap on this list. Sorry, Water Cannon. Okay, next up, Flamethrower. Where would I even put this? Fuck it, we'll stick it here. So, this will be, depending on how you want to go about things, this will be one of the first AoE attacks that you get. Probably not the first, that will probably go to drill cannons. But this one can be gotten pretty early on from a couple of level 50 dungeons. Fun fact, this is also can be acquired from Omega, making that the only duty in the entire game capable of dropping 3 spells. But is it worth it getting from there? Not really. I mean, if you don't have it, you can, sure, but otherwise, you'll get used to hearing this because you'll hear it a lot. 220 potency AoE spell with a 50% damage fall off. It does fire damage, it's a frontal cone, meaning that the range is trash, and it has no extra effect to make it stand out in any way, shape, or form. Only sticking it in rarely useful because a lot of the AoE attacks blend together, and in a post-ultravibration world, they're all basically useless outside of a few niche things anyway, so there are worse spells you can use for an AoE, but there are definitely better ones as well. Next up, oh joy, this piece of crap. So not only do you have to slog through one of the worst trials in the entire game to get your hands on this, what do you get as your reward? One of the worst spells a Blue Mage has, and it's not even close. 140 potency AoE attack with a 50% fall off, and it applies a dot that only ticks for 20 potency every tick. 20 potency. That is 2 casts of Flying Sardine. And while, yes, you could argue that, oh, well, it's not meant to be used by itself, it's meant to be comboed with stuff. Both of the combos are trash as well, so there's no point. You would be better off using basically any other spell than this one. It's a weak attack that puts an even weaker dot on the... I mean, the fact that Warrior's Vengeance will probably do more damage to an enemy than this tells you all you need to know about it. Do not ever use this crap spell. Do not try to use either of the combos. It is trash. Alrighty, next up, where are you? Flying Frenzy. Now, is this spell good for damage? No, not at all. 150 potency with a 50% fall off. It's not very good for damage at all, but it's not really meant to be that. This is one of only 2 gap closers that Blue Mage has, and while yes, it does have a cast time, it's unlimited use. So, playing as a Blue Mage tank, sometimes you don't have J-kick up and the boss jumps away and you need to get back in to start goblin punching. This spell can be good to use in those instances. Now, is it kind of a waste of a slot? You could argue, yeah. Like I said, the damage is really lacking, and you could use that for another mitigation, another utility spell, etc., etc. But the fact that Goblin Punch is such a good spell, but it requires you to be right up in the enemy's face, makes it so retroactively makes this spell just better. And anything that makes Blue Mage tank less clunky to play is definitely going to be rated a bit higher in my book. And yeah, it's a gap closer on a class that desperately needs better mobility. It's good. Sometimes it's useful. Okay, Drill Cannons. This will probably be the first AoE spell that a lot of people get because it's gotten from Realm Reborn Overworld mob. The robots in Northern Thanalan, I believe. As far as holding up, though, it leaves something to be desired. First off, the damage is lacking, only 200 potency with that still 50% fall off, making it less than a lot of these other AoE spells, even Flamethrower. And while it does have a secondary effect, while it does do physical damage, while it does do a line AoE, so it at least has better range than Flamethrower, the fact that its secondary effect only works on petrified enemies. You know how many spells Blue Mage has that petrify enemies? 1. And it only works on enemies with levels of a multiple of 5. So, you're never, ever, ever going to take advantage of that, ever. The only time an enemy is ever going to be petrified is in that one stage of the Masked Carnivale. Otherwise, yeah. If you have any other AoE spell, it's better to use than this one. Well, unless, apart from Aqua Breath, of course, but you know what I mean. Not very good. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's useless. Speaking of useless, High Voltage. The only spell you can get from coils. And it's hot garbage. First off, only 180 potency for a normal usage. 180. And while yes, it does give paralysis, there are plenty of other paralysis givers down here that are much, much better. In fact, paralysis is probably Blue Mage's biggest status effect that it can give, because so many spells give paralysis. And while you can say, oh, it combos with something, what does it combo with? This. And all that does is just increase its damage to the same amount as most other AoE attacks. Brings it up from 180 to 220. And that's all it does. So you are effectively wasting 2 spell slots to make one bad spell as good as the other bad spells, instead of just using another spell that makes itself good, and that's it. The only spell from coils, ladies and gentlemen, and it's from a freaking door boss. Not even from any of the cool stuff, like no Tintania dives, no flare breath, no acorn. This is what you get from coils. Suck it up. Absolute garbage. Don't use it. Next up, Loom. You ever thought to yourself, wow, I wish that Blue Mage had Ninja's teleport ability, except worse. And Square Enix must have heard your cries, because in comes Loom. I mean, at least you can get it from an overworld mob, but all it is it's a very short-range teleport with a cast time. It's a waste of a GCD, you could walk that amount of distance in the amount of time it takes to cast it, and it's only useful in one stage of the Masked Carnivale where you are rendered unable to move by the mobs. Great. If this didn't have a cast time, it'd be, like, up here somewhere, probably. But, because Blue Mage desperately needs that extra mobility, but the fact that it has such a minuscule range, and the fact that it has a cast time, yeah, it's only useful on the Carnivale, otherwise, don't. But finally, after slogging through all that shite, we of course have Final Sting. One of my personal favorites just because of how stupid it is, but also how powerful it is. The strongest single target attack in the game, outside of PvP that is. 2,000 potency single target damage. which can then be boosted multiplicatively by Whistle, Tingle, and Moonflute, as well as Physical Libra and Off Guard, totaling up to an absolutely absurd amount of damage that you could put out on a whim. Only downside being, it kills you when you use it. And the reason it's not always useful, however, though, is because it does become less useful as enemy health amounts increase. Like, it's already starting to struggle around the Heavensward era. But then once you start getting up to Omega, once you start getting up to Eden, that's when it becomes not amazingly worth it to use. I mean, I still use it for all my clears. Fun fact, my clears for both O12S and E12S were both achieved by Final Sting. For Omega, we managed to make it, and then one of my party members got a crit after we'd bumbled our way through Hello World 2, after we'd gotten ourselves killed in multiple other areas. A crit Final Sting saved us. And then, same thing for E12S. We had gotten our way through advanced relativity for the first time, and then everybody, including me, got killed to triple apocalypse. And then somebody managed to get me back up. The boss was at 1.2%. I said fuck it, threw a Hail Mary Final Sting out there, and that got us the clear. We probably would have gotten the clear otherwise, but I'd like to think that I single-handedly saved the pull. It's more fun that way. So while yes, it does kill you, that stupid amount of damage, especially at lower levels. At lower levels, this spell is an absolute monster. You can take multiple % off savage bosses before they even have time to blink. It's nuts. So the only reason it's sometimes useful is because as you get up to higher levels, it becomes less useful. But it will always have a special place in my heart for that reason. Next up, Song of Torment. This unassuming little 30-second bleed dot carries your DPS on its back. You might think, oh, that's Immortal Flame, oh, that's Breath of Magic. No, this can be put on anybody, it can be boosted by Bristle, it can be boosted by all other damage multipliers, however few there are, I guess. And all it does is it just applies a ticking dot. 75 potency with Bristle boost, and that's all you need. And in fights with a lot of movement, in fights where you are unable to cast, this spell carries. That's why you'll always hear Blue Savage leaders yelling at their party, so dot up the boss. They're talking about this unassuming little Realm Reborn dot spell from one of the worst dungeons in the game carries that hard, and for that reason, that's our first always useful. But then after the good stuff, we have to get back to stuff like this that's a little less fun to talk about. Glower. It's a line AoE attack. 220 potency, 50% fall off, but this time it gives paralysis for 6 seconds. Great. Basically every other paralysis source will give you triple that, but sure, why not? It's an AoE attack in a post-ultravibration world, meaning that it's useless a lot of the time, and it only gives 6 seconds of a status effect that other spells give much more of. Great. That's about all I had to say. Rarely useful, because it's better than these, at least. Next up, Plainscracker. You probably forgot this spell existed, because I know I did. 220 potency. This time, it's a circle AoE around you, with no bells, no whistles, it's just an attack in a post-ultravibration world. Cool, and that's about all I have to say about it. It's just that boring and that uneventful. But then, to save us from more mediocrity, we of course have Bristle. You cast this, and it boosts your next spell cast by 50%. Well, your next damaging spell, anyway. Now, you want to know which moves that Blue Mage has are called spells? Basically all of them. So, I mean, this boosts everything. It just makes your next spell cast stronger. It affects dots, it affects attacks, it affects everything except heals and barriers, basically. And this, combined with this, some serious hurt. This combined with Mortal Flame, this combined with freaking Breath of Magic, just makes good spells better. And for that reason, it's always useful, because it's always going to be useful to somebody. Like, yes, the Savage guides will tell you to switch this out for something else if you really need to swap out a ton of spells, but this is always going to be useful for somebody. It's going to be useful for the DPS, it's going to be useful for the dot guys. The point is that it's just a really good spell, it's always going to be useful for somebody, and for that reason, always useful. Okie dokie, next up, Light Wind. The strongest healing spell in the game, bar none. You cast this, and it heals you and everyone around you for an amount equaling your current HP, which means if you're at full health, it's going to be a party-wide benediction. Or you could heal one person to full health and kill yourself if you want to use transfusion. But no. No mimic requirements. The only downside is that it costs a shitload of MP. But apart from that, you can single-handedly save pulls, you can single-handedly get the tank back up, you can single-handedly keep the entire party alive as a DPS with this healing spell, and you only need to get 10 spells to unlock it. So basically every single blue mage, even the shittiest party finder terrorizers, will have this spell in their repertoire. And it's just really good. I mean, what do you want me to say? It's a full party heal, basically on demand. That's about all you need. Okay, next up, we gotta deal with this piece of crap. Level 5 Petrify. So, not only is it basically inferior to Ram's Voice in basically every way, I mean, it's a crowd control spell. Not only does it not work in a circle around you, but instead a cone in front of you, limiting its usefulness, but it also has a level requirement. This only works on enemies with a level that's a multiple of 5. Meaning 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. So essentially, only level cap dungeons would this ever be useful in, where all the enemies are naturally going to be at 50, 60, 70, etc. Which is already terrible in and of itself. But also the fact that it's has a freaking percentage-based chance of failing as well. Like, it sometimes just will not work. For no reason, even though you filled out all the other ridiculous stipulations, jumped through every flaming hoop, signed on every dotted line, and the spell still just might not work for you. Like, great. Do you want a worse version of Ram's Voice? Here you go. Available from a random trash mob in a bad Realm Reborn dungeon. Cool. Freaking terrible. Don't use it. Okay, next up. Sharpened Knife. What do I even do with this? We'll put it in rarely useful just because it does more damage than Water Cannon. Apart from that, though, I mean, it's kind of funny that a lot of Blue Mage's strongest spells are just stabbing people. Like, this is stabbing people, this is stabbing people, this is stabbing people, this is stabbing people, freaking... A lot of stabbing. Stab Mage. Stabs people more than freaking Ninja does, that's for sure. But, 220 potency, so it at least does some amount of damage. It's got a decent casting time, I believe. And it does have the extra fun little thing of when a target is paralyzed, or stunned, rather, it does bonus damage, like, cool. So all 2 spells that Blue Mage has that stuns, for all the 3 seconds that stun lasts for, you get a couple extra funny stabs in there, but what really kills this spell is the fact that, well, it's melee range, being one of a couple of spells that requires you to be in breath smelling distance, but unlike Goblin Punch, which is a straight upgrade to basically every other single target spell for tanks specifically, Sharpened Knife just isn't very good. I mean, it does fine enough damage, but the fact that you have to be always on the boss's ass to be able to use it properly means that it just isn't very good. I mean, I'd almost, if the damage was worse, I'd put it in useless, but the fact that it at least does decent damage when you're first starting out, this could be your first single target upgrade for Blue Mage if you're first starting out, but otherwise, you've got far... Alright, next up, Ice Spikes. Garbage. Absolute garbage. So, this is one of multiple counter spells that Blue Mage has, which is just a worse version of Warrior's Vengeance and Damnation. And for whatever reason, the people who terrorize Blue Mage Party Finder swear by this spell. By which I mean they only equip it on healer and DPS, and then they take 0 damage the entire duty, and think that they've accomplished something by using it. This is a 40 potency counter that only works on melee attacks, and it only lasts for 15 seconds. It is a waste of a GCD, it does no damage whatsoever. It does less damage if you're taking no damage yourself, but I guess most people play this game, this heavily text and story-focused game, just can't read, I guess. Because you'll always see the DPS and healers using this all the time, even when they haven't taken a single point of damage, and they'll think that they've accomplished something. Absolute garbage. I don't know why this even exists. Even at Realm Reborn level, it's useless. Just... Oh, but it does have the additional effect that occasionally the attacker will be afflicted with slow for 15 seconds. Cool, so it's not only a worse version of Damnation, it's also a worse version of Arm's Length. Amazing. Thank you so much. No, please do not use this. I am so tired of telling people not to use this spell. It's really that bad. Please don't. But then, to save us from that cavalcade of mediocrity, we have Blood Drain. This unassuming little spell that you get from one of the earliest areas in the game, and it's one of the best Blue Mage has. It's real simple. You pay 100 MP to cast it, and you get 500 MP back, for a net gain of 400 per cast. I mean, it's infinite MP on a cast that exclusively on a class that exclusively deals in MP, which is already amazing, and it's also better than the spell that it does the same thing that comes much later. And unfortunately, it doesn't say that in the tooltip, so a lot of people end up using that spell and screwing themselves over and everybody else over and looking like a fool. So if you need MP, use this. It's literally infinite MP. The other spell we'll get to much later, but needless to say, this one, again, from one of the starting areas of the game, that you can spam basically infinitely, is better than one that you get from a level 70-something trial. It's just real good. Okay, Acorn Bomb. You know what's a real useful status effect? Sleep. You can, on a class that can freeze, petrify, paralyze, basically every other status effect in the game, a class having multiple spells centered around sleep, something that all casters and all healers have access to, a spell that is so useless that not even the people who terrorize Duty Finder can even use it half the time. Like, yeah, let's give multiple of those to Blue Mage. So, if you want to paralyze some enemies and then not be able to attack them without undoing that paralysis, you can do that, I guess. If you really need to run away, you can just... Could have frozen them, could have petrified them, could have done basically anything else, but no, let's put them to sleep and hope that it works. Because it only works on enemies that are of your level and lower anyway. I mean, all the other crowd control spells do as well, but I just really like shitting on sleep. Like, what were they thinking, honestly? And the fact that this spell is, like, only useful in one dungeon, and it's a dungeon that Blue Mage won't be able to access for another 4 years or so. Why is sleep even in the game anymore? Just don't. And Bomb Toss. I mean, it's a stun. It's an AoE stun. It does fire damage. The damage isn't crazy, but you won't be using it for the damage, so that's not really... It's much more utility-focused. I mean, the only time that you'll ever want to use this spell in any legitimate fashion is in Alexander, in A4, I believe. The Manipulator, whichever one that is. Because you need to stun one of the legs, or else it will zap everybody's MP away. And so, this is one of two options that you have for that. Apart from that... why would you stun the enemies? Why would you stun the enemies for 3 seconds when you can freeze them for like 20 with multiple casts of Ram's Voice? Like, so you use this when you absolutely need to stun. Otherwise, why would you even bother? It would be useless if it did not have at least one use of stunning enemies that can't be frozen. But apart from that, not good. Not good at all. Next up, Off Guard. I mean... I won't really have much to say about it. You cast this, and it makes the enemy take 5% more damage from all sources. And everybody can bring it, so you can have a permanent 5% damage buff for the entire party, adding on to the already ridiculous damage that Blue Mage is capable of doing. As long as people aren't overwriting it like stupid people, then it's just real good. Not much else to say about it. Alright, Self-Destruct. Forget, we'll stick it here. Now, is the spell really funny? Yes, this is the only way that you can die in cities, is by using this spell. So anytime you see anybody laying down dead in a city, it's because they've used this spell. This spell is also very useful for getting the fricking sightseeing log in Kugane, by having somebody else do all the work for you, and then res you on top of it by blowing yourself up with self-destruct. So there's at least one use for it, so that keeps it out of useless. It is, I mean, it does do good damage. I mean... 1800 potency with Toad Oil as opposed to the 2000 potency from Final Sting. But if you want every single last scrap of damage that then is run through all of the different boosters, you'll definitely want to use Final Sting on any actual boss. This can be cheesed on multi-bosses, but like for example, the current strategy for doing Leviathan EX is to just run to the middle of the platform, oil up, and then blow yourself up to hit both heads with that damage. But otherwise, for the most part, if you're going to do a kamikaze attack, you'll want to use Final Sting. It's still really funny, and it still helps you get that terrible sightseeing log in Kugane, so there's at least that, but otherwise, just use Final Sting. Okay, Faze. We'll stick it right alongside Bomb Toss. I mean, It's just another AoE stun, except this one doesn't do damage, and it's a frontal cone, so the range is trash, so it's worse than Bomb Toss. But again, same restrictions apply. If you absolutely need a stun for enemies that can't be frozen, you'll use this, I guess, and or actually just use Bomb Toss, because it's better. So, but if you don't have Bomb Toss, you can use this, but just use Bomb Toss, because it's better, and you get it from overworld mobs. Great. Cool, thanks, FaZe. Another funny spell we've got is Flying Sardine. And this is the weakest spell in the game, hitting for only 10 potency per cast. It's also one of the only instant cast Blue Mage spells, so there's that at least. So we can say that these penguins in Costa del Sol are actually primals. But it's one of the only interrupts that Blue Mage has, and for that, it's always going to be useful when you have something to interrupt. But that's why it's not an always useful, because, well, you're not always going to have something to interrupt, and you're obviously not going to be using this as an attack. Although, as an aside, it is actually kind of good for grabbing enemies as a tank, because it's an instant cast ranged attack, something that most other stuff, apart from the other, if both Shock Strike and Feather Rain are on cooldown, just use this to hit the enemies, and that'll do at least enough damage to keep them from attacking the DPS while you move to the next group. So when you have something to interrupt, or when you're playing tank, it's going to be really useful. Otherwise, though, if you don't have anything to interrupt, then it's going to be useless, unless you're using it as a tank. So, sometimes useful. Right, so you remember that terrible freaking trial that you had to get Aqua Breath from earlier? Well, this also comes from there, and it's even worse. So you can slog through one of the worst, most unfun trials in the entire game, watching people get blown off the platform left, right, and center, getting themselves killed by stupid means, having to spam one button as a kappa for most of the fight if you were unlucky enough to get chosen. And what do you get in return? 2 of the worst spells. Actually, 3 of the worst spells. So, actually tied with Omega for most amount of spells in a single duty, but when all 3 of them are trashed, and we'll get to the next one shortly, don't worry, it really doesn't feel like that much of a victory. So, Snort. It does knockback, and that's it. Yay, knockback. So you can knock enemies away from you so they take 1 more second to come back and start hitting you again. Knockback, so you'll knock everybody out of the range of everybody else's spells, and your party members will want to toss you into the sun. Yeah, that knockback. And no damage whatsoever. It just pushes enemies away. And it doesn't work on enemies in treasure dungeons, as far as I'm aware, so what use does this have? None. Not even in the carnivale, in the few stages where you need to move stuff around because you'll overshoot your target or launch them into the wall and be unable to get them back out. So, it's useless. Utterly useless. Why would you ever use this? So, yeah. Thanks for your time in the Dragon's Neck. Here are your spells. Okay, the look. It's an AoE attack, 220 potency, as always. It's a frontal cone, so the range is trash, but you don't really use this for damage. You use this in multi-tank fights to get some aggro without using White Wind and getting all of the bosses on you. So you'll use this in T9, you can use this in O12, you can use this in A8, if you want to, I guess. But apart from that, it does do good damage, but you're only going to be using it for those specific fights. So, frick it, we'll stick it down here. Because it's only useful in those multi-tank fights to get that aggro. You don't really need it if you're a Blue Mage tank with Mighty Guard on, because even with the damage reduction, you're still going to be doing enough aggro to hold on to the enemies without needing to spam this. So, if you want to get aggro back after you've died, there are worse options, but just use White Wind. Just pop an Ether, use White Wind, and boom, you've got aggro back. Cool. Another unassuming spell that is one of Blue Mage's best, Bad Breath, or as I like to call it, Chad Breath, because this spell does everything you need it to. The most status effects from a single attack by leaps and bounds, and it's not even close. Just one usage of this attack for the low cost of 500 per MP, you get slow, heavy, blind, paralysis, poison, damage down, and it also functions as an interrupt. All of that from one Realm Reborn Overworld spell. Incredible. Genuinely incredible. Always useful. This is the tank bread and butter spell. You might think it's a bit weird for the Morbold to be the Blue Mage mount, but then once you see Bad Breath, once you see what it is capable of letting you get away with, once you see how much better it makes Blue Mage tanking, There's no question. The Morble is the symbol of Blue Mage, because this spell is one of the best. I love you, Chad Breath. Never change. And keeping up with that trajectory, we have Diamondback. The only reason it's not always useful, in fact, fine, we'll put it in always useful for tanks only. But this spell is a portable, on-demand tank limit break. You cast it, and you get 90% damage reduction from all sources for 10 seconds, as well as total knockback and draw-in immunity from the vast, vast majority of sources. Only downside being is that it completely paralyzes you and renders you unable to move or act for those full 10 seconds, and it costs a whopping 3,000 MP per cast. But that's really chump change compared to what this spell can do. This lets you survive shit you really should not be able to survive. This lets you cheese entire savage phases, just completely bypassing entire sections of fights just by virtue of your big blue balls. And that's basically all there is to it. It's a portable tank limit break that anybody can use with no mimic requirement. I mean, the fact that you can just stand still and completely negate an entire phase of Brute Justice should really tell you all you need to know about this freaking low-level spell you get from a crappy Realm Reborn dungeon. Incredible. Okay, next up, Sticky Dong. It gives you a little bit of aggro, and it pulls the enemy towards you with no damage done. Now, while it is actually used in T9 in order to pull the golems out of center by the golem baiters, I'm still putting it in Carnivale fodder because it's just that bad. It just pulls a single enemy toward you with a cast time, mind, and it gives you a little bit of extra aggro, and that's about it. It's only really useful in a couple stages of the Mass Carnivale, or I think, is that the same stage? I believe it is. Where you just have to pull the freaking slimes around and then blow them up. It's really tedious and really boring, and I hate that stage, and it's always the weekly bonus. And that's the only time you'll be using this spell. Otherwise, there's another draw-in spell that's coming later that blows this out of the water, and it's just weird. Why would you ever use this outside the Mass Carnivale? Just don't. Okay, next up, Toad Oil. We'll put this here, I guess. So, on paper, it sounds good. It is a permanent in the sense that it has a long duration. A cooldown that just gives you 20% chance to evade and attack, which means 20% chance of not taking any damage whenever damage comes your way. It's fine on tank. Some tank mains swear by it. I know this one guy that's always playing Loom Mage tank in party finder groups, and he swears by this spell. You will never, ever, ever be without this status on him for the entire freaking duty. And he's a big shirtless Rogan, so that just makes it even funnier. But there are worse spells you could bring on tank. There are also better ones as well. It just gives you a 20% chance to avoid damage, which means that if you get unlucky, it's effectively useless. And it also does make self-destruct slightly stronger, but honestly, who cares? Unless you're using it to cheese Leviathan, who cares? So, again, there are better spells to use on tank, there are worse spells to use on tank. It does what it says on the tin, and that's about all you need it to do. But if you really want to min-max your survivability, it's good on tank. So, use it on tank. Okay, the quintessential one-shot combo for Blue Mage is two parts. One part is ultravibration, and the other part is this little ditty called the Ram's Voice. 220 potency, circle AoE around you, but that's not what you use it for. You use it because it freezes all nearby enemies. If they are not immune to being frozen, they are frozen, meaning that they are stunned, they cannot move, they cannot attack, they cannot buff, they are stuck. And even if ultravibration, even if you don't have this spell, or even if it's on cooldown at the moment, you are still immobilizing those mobs and making it so they cannot do anything to you. It's just real good. Any class in any game would kill for that sort of utility. And even outside of dungeons, it still works amazingly in Fates as well. You can pull in a whole bunch of enemies, freeze them solid, and render them completely unable to smack your squishy blue ass. It's just real good. Now, unfortunately, the other half of the equation, the Dragon's Voice, isn't nearly as good as its big brother. Now, it does have some utility by having an absolutely gargantuan area of effect, probably the biggest, so it does have that virtue of being the largest AoE that attack that Blue Mage has, because Hydro Pull is slightly smaller. However, it also has the downside of doing less damage, being only 200 potency. It removes the freezing done by Ram's voice, which means that if you actually do that to people in a dungeon right as they're about to ultravibe and waste their ultravibe, they're going to want to murder you. And also the fact that it has a gargantuan ring in the middle, making it at least accurate to the boss version. That means that once you hit enemies with it and they aggro to you, they're just going to run towards you, and then they're going to be in the middle and safe from the attack and make it completely useless. So, it is used in A12. It's used for the ad phase, where the tank just grabs all the mobs and runs in a circle, and then everybody else just stands in the middle spamming this in order to kill all the mobs. So it does have that, but otherwise, I mean, it just doesn't do that much damage, and everything else gives paralysis, and if the enemies are aggro to you, they're just going to run to you and avoid the entire attack. So, apart from a couple niche use cases, it's not very good, unfortunately, which sucks because it looks awesome and it feels awesome to use. Next up, Missile. Of the death effects that Blue Mage has that aren't ultravibration, this one is the best one, simply because it's the most consistent. You fire this onto at an enemy that isn't immune to it, and they have a 50% chance of taking 50% of their total HP, of their current HP and damage, rather. So if they have 100 HP and you shoot this at them and it works, then they take 50 damage. And it works on enemies and it works on bosses. So if you are min-maxing, if you just want to get the enemies dead as quickly as possible, Missile is the way to go. It has the highest use case outside of ultravibrations, 100%, being 50% on any enemy that isn't immune to it. And fun fact, if you land 2 of them on the same tick, they both will do the 50% damage of the boss's total HP and just kill them outright, which is very funny to see. And 1,000 Needles. Now this one's kind of weird, because at low levels, this spell is godlike. Like, being able to swift cast 1,000 points of damage out of your ass whenever you want, at low levels when most of your attacks are going to be doing like 50 damage at most, is incredible. You can chunk bosses, you can chunk enemy squads, you can chunk basically anything you can come into contact with, provided you survive the 5-second cast time. But unfortunately, as soon as you get up anywhere past low levels, this stops being amazing and stops being a literal wasted slot. Like, when even your freaking auto attack is doing more damage than this will be. Okay, well, not that far, but when even your lowest, shittiest Realm Reborn spells are still going to be doing more damage than this with every single cast, why would you even bother? That's a trick question. You shouldn't. Like, why on earth would you ever do that? At low levels, absolutely incredible. At anything above low level, terrible. Like, at low levels, you can chunk freaking overworld fate bosses, you can chunk big enemies, you can chunk bosses, you can sink and go into Realm Reborn stuff and still tear shit up with this. But otherwise, once you get past that honeymoon phase and your Blue Mage gets up to anywhere close to a higher level, then it just becomes useless. So, rarely useful in the low level, terrible at high levels. Very weird, but very faithful. I actually missed a spell, didn't I? Jeez. Well, I mean, my eyes kind of glaze over whenever I see this spell. Oh boy, Dragon's Neck, the unholy trifecta of shitty spells. 4 tons weight. Its damage is pitiful, only 200 potency. It is a targeted AoE, meaning that it's very difficult to spam effectively. And its only upside being that it gives a heavy for 30 seconds. Like, cool, so the enemy takes an extra 1 second to get to you after you've blown them away with freaking snorts. Like, yay, they miss 1 auto attack. Amazing. This spell's only value is using it as an emote, actually, because it's very funny dropping weights on people in cities while they're being weird and creepy. But otherwise, no, do not ever use this spell. Like, it might have, I believe it does have a niche usage in one of the Savage fights, where to slow down an enemy, making it so it can't get to you as quickly. But who really cares? Those fights are easy. Just use this, drop this on people when they're spamming Dote in Limsa, and otherwise, don't bother. Well, speaking of dog shit attacks that you get from octopi, or octopuses, rather, that's the correct form of plural octopus. It's octopuses. But anyway, Inkjet. It's another shitty frontal cone AoE attack, and it doesn't even do a dot this time. Not only is it 200 potency, so the damage sucks, but all it gives is blind. You know what else gives blind? The Chad Breath. Here is the Virgin Inkjet. Here is the Chad Breath. Not even a competition. Terrible dungeon, terrible boss, terrible spell. Go away, you suck. Okay, next up, Fire and Gun. Trash. So it doesn't do much damage, only 200 potency with 50% fall off. It's an AoE attack. It deals physical fire damage, which I don't even know what that means. I mean, I've tried using this on physical stuff in the Mass Carnivale, and I fail, but maybe it was something else, I don't know. But physical fire damage, physical earth damage, I don't know what that means. Like, does that mean that it's both? Does it mean that it's neither? Does it mean that you'll fail? Does it mean that you'll succeed? Who the fuck knows? All I know is don't use the spell because it's trash, and, yeah. Now, far too few people truly understand the power of the Moon Flute Opener, the sacred art passed down through all Blue Mage kind. Why does nobody use this in Party Finder groups? I don't understand. Like, you're playing DPS, the whole point is that you're doing big damage. So why would you not use the biggest freaking damage boost in the entire game? I don't understand. But anyway, cast the spell. 15 seconds of boosted damage and boosted movement speed, a whopping 50% extra bonus damage that stacks with other damage boosters. And then, when all is said and done, when you vomited out every single one of your most powerful spells and laid waste to everything in your path, you then get 15 seconds where you can do nothing but move and jump to sit back and admire your handiwork. Like, why do you not use this? If you're a DPS and not doing a Moon Flute Opener, at least using a Moon Flute to boost your dots at the very least, you are doing everybody a massive disservice. Use Moon Flute, destroy everything, become untouchable, and then laugh. Just use it. Now, is Tail Screw a good spell? No. Is it fun to use, though? When it works. Now, if you're purely into the min-maxing scene, you'll want to use Missile for any bosses and any enemies that are susceptible to death effects, because it works more often. Missile works about 50% of the time, Tail Screw only works about 10% of the time. However, when it does work, it immediately reduces the enemy's HP down to 1, meaning that any amount of damage will then just immediately kill them, which is very, very cathartic and very hilarious to watch people's reactions when a boss just evaporates in a single cast. But otherwise, if you are actually using it, if you are actually wanting to not screw around, just use Missile. Otherwise, Tail Screw, it's fun if you want to goof around, it's fun when it actually works, but then sometimes you'll get to a boss that could have been dead much faster from Missile, and you'll be standing there spamming this 20 times in a row and not having it proc, and it sucks. But when it works, it works. 10% of the time, it works all the time. And sometimes, if you're just running a fun little dungeon run on Blue Mage, sometimes that's all you need. Okay, Mind Blast. It's just bad. You get it from a bad dungeon, in a bad Early Realm Reborn dungeon. It does pitiful damage. It gives paralysis, like the Chad Breath does. And that's it. Like, yeah, it's 30 seconds, which is fine, I guess, but you could just keep using Bad Breath. You could just use any other source of paralysis and actually do damage. I mean, it's a quest spell, so at least you can get it guaranteed even unsynced, so you don't have to suffer through Tamtara to get it normally. But, or if you're a real masochist, you could also get it from Blaster, or whichever robot it is, from from Brute Justice, or from one of those other Alexander fights, but don't do that. Just get it from Tamtara, toss it in the spellbook, forget you have it. It's just bad. Okay, next up, Doom. Now, it's still not as good as Missile, but it at least works a lot more than 10% like Tail Screw does. Missile is 50%, Doom is around 30%. However, the Doom debuff lasts a full 15 seconds, so it takes 15 seconds for applying the debuff to the boss actually dying. So, in that amount of time, you could have just used Missile and likely killed it faster anyway. So, Missile is still the king, but again, it's really cathartic to just stand there and then watch as a boss dies instantly. But if you're going for efficiency, use Missile. If you're going for fun, use Doom. If you're going for memes, use Tail Screw. Alright, Peculiar Light. It's just another OGCD with a cast time. Just another damage booster, except it's AoE, so it works on all nearby enemies of the caster, and it only works on magic damage as opposed to physical. It can stack with Off Guard, but it doesn't affect physical damage, so it won't affect a lot of Blue's strongest attacks, like Triple Trident or Final Sting or whatever. But toss this on the tank, and boom, even more free damage for the entire party. It's just that easy. It just works. Always useful. Alrighty, Feather Rain. Now, this is kind of a weak attack. It's only 220 potency. Well, 220 potency and then a few extra ticks of a dot damage. So it is actually better than Eruption, the spell that it shares a recast with. But ordinarily, this would have gotten power crept out ages ago, but the fact that it's only got a 30-second recharge means that it's always going to be useful. It's especially useful on tank. You can use this to grab enemy groups while you're moving, alongside Shock Strike and Flying Sardine. And it's just a good supplemental damage source for anybody who has an extra button to press. It's not going to wow you in any way, but it's just a free instant AoE attack that comes up constantly. And then on the flip side, we have Eruption. Now, is Eruption a bad spell? No. Absolutely not. But is it as good as Feather Rain? No. It does do more damage up front, doing a 300 potency as opposed to 220, but thanks to spell speed and thanks to the dot that Feather Rain gives, it does do more damage eventually. It's like how both ends does more damage than Night Bloom, but Night Bloom is uncontestably better because of the dot it gives. And this is a similar story. So, is Eruption a bad spell? Are your party members going to hate you if you use it? No, absolutely not. In fact, personally, I like it kind of better than Feather Rain just because it's cathartic to throw explosions at people. But if you're going for min-maxing, just use Feather Rain. It's strictly better. But Eruption is far from a bad spell. And in a similar vein, is Mountain Buster a bad spell? No. Again, far from it, but where do I even put this? See, it isn't a bad spell, but at the same time, the distinction between it and Shock Strike is even better, so fuck it, we'll stick it in rarely useful. So, Mountain Buster, it's a frontal cone that does 400 potency, 50% fall off, instant cast, looks super cool, feels super awesome, but unfortunately, because it's a frontal cone attack, because you need to be up close and personal for it to hit, it's just strictly worse than Shock Strike for a number of reasons. Like, almost nobody uses this because Shock Strike is just better by all accounts. Unless you are doing Mastery of Earth in the Masked Carnivale, otherwise there's no real point in using Mountain Buster. But is it cool? Does it feel great to use? Absolutely. And it's still far from a bad spell. Just again, if you're going for min-maxing, just use Shock Strike. It's strictly better. And speaking of Shock Strike, it's just an OGCD 400 potency AoE attack that hits the target and everything around it. It does what it says on the tin. It's great for grabbing mobs on tank. It's great for adding supplemental damage to DPS and healers. It is just real good. If it was a bit weaker, it probably would have been power crept out by this point, but the fact that it's 400 potency and the fact that it's an instant cast with a short recharge just makes it a real good spell. Again, the only reason why it isn't always useful is just because it does get taken out in favor of some other utility spells when the situation calls for it. But otherwise, it's just real good. In fact, no, actually, we'll stick Shock Strike up here just because it's so far down the priority list that if you're taking this off, it means that you're basically gutting all of your DPS altogether. So if you're not taking off all of your spells, if you've already gotten rid of stuff like freaking Rosa Destruction and Sea Shanty and all that, then it's not really going to matter that much the rest of your damage kit. But so Shock Strike will just go in always useful. It's just real good. And then we've got the only set of primal spells in Realm Reborn that have since been power crept out. Now, again, is Glass Dance a bad spell? No. It's an instant AoE attack, 350 potency in a big wide sort of semicircle in front of you. It's kind of weird. It's weird trying to figure out what the hitbox is on this thing, but is it a bad spell? No, but the fact that it's only 350 potency, and the fact that it's just another thing to manage when you've got far better spells at your disposal, it's just not as good as it used to be. Is it a bad spell? No, but at this point it has been effectively power crept out by raiders and anybody who actually really wants to perfect Blue Mage. So for that reason it goes in rarely useful, because again, it's not a bad spell, it's just not good and it's basically obsolete nowadays. But in any case, it is far better than what it shares a freaking recharge with, that being Veil of the freaking Whorl. Like, oh goody, another retaliation spell, except this one is arguably even worse than freaking Ice Spikes, which is quite an accomplishment. So it is a primal spell, meaning that it doesn't have a cast time, which is appreciated. However, it's only 50 counter potency, and it only lasts for 30 seconds. So even if you bring this along, this is still not going to equate to the amount of damage that any other damaging spell you could have brought could have done instead. So yes, it's an instant cast. Like, yes, it's going to do damage if you're a tank, but it does so little damage that it's not even worth it. Like, this is less than Warrior's Damnation, and Warrior's Damnation is also a 40% damage reduction, and it also gives you a heal. Whereas this, all it does is just retaliate against physical attackers. Physical attackers that are going to be frozen if your party is competent anyway. So there is no reason whatsoever. Like, at some point, I experimented with this, because I thought surely it could not be that bad. Like, surely it could have some passing usage as a tank, but no. It is that irredeemably awful. And how it even snuck past quality assurance, even back in the day, is something that needs to be freaking studied. It is horrible. Do not ever use this spell. And then another spell that a lot of people forget exists, Alpine Draft. Say it with me now, folks. 220 potency, 50% fall off, except it's got no redeeming qualities whatsoever. No extra effects. It just does wind damage in a frontal line. Frontal line, yeah. And that's all it is to it. In a post-ultravibration world, it's just not real good. It's the only thing that keeps it out of useless territory is the fact that it does more damage than any of this garbage. But otherwise, you've got far better spells available, as always. So the Living Liquid is actually kind of an anomaly in Final Fantasy XIV, in that not only did it almost kill raiding, every time I see the spell and I'm reminded that it exists, it kills me as well. God. So the damage is fine, it's 220 potency, just like everything else. However, its additional effect is knockback. Like, whoop-de-frickin-do. Let's push all the enemies out of range of all of my party members' ultra-vibrations and get them all to wish for my death. Push all the enemies away from me so they take an extra 1 second to run back and start auto-attacking me. I mean, knockback can interrupt casters, but most trash mobs aren't casters. Melee attackers, or they have instant ranged attacks. So, it's just terrible. All it does is just screw with your party members and you, and it does what other spells can do better. Why would you do this? Why would you forsake me, Pepsi Man? And then it just keeps going. Northerlies. Like, hey, you know that Realm Reborn spell, Ram's Voice, that freezes all nearby enemies on contact? What if we made it worse? What if we made it so that in order to freeze the enemies, you not only have to hit them with Northerlies, but you have to hit them with this piece of crap as well, Aqua Breath. So you've got to waste 2 spell slots to get the same effect that one spell does better. Like, at least it's a quest spell, you can get it from an overworld mob in about 30 seconds. But why? Why would you ever use this? Ram's Voice is right there, and it's superior in every form and fashion. Just use Ram's Voice. Forget this ever existed, please. Okay, Electrogenesis. I always get Electrogenesis and Reflux mixed up because they look exactly the same. Here we go. Really useful. 220 potency, 50% fall off, no bells, no whistles, except now it's around your target. Whoop-de-doo. Cool, really useful. Moving on. Kaltstrahl, one of the only spells you can get from Alexander, and like all of them except for J-Kick, it's just kind of okay for the most part. Well, not Protean Wave, but... Say it with me now, 220 potency, frontal cone AoE, 50% fall off. It does physical damage, so there's that at least, but apart from that, why would you use this? Use something else, it's better. Abyssal Transfixion, okay, breathe. Finally something a bit better. So if Sonic Boom didn't exist, this would probably be the meta DPS spam spell, but even nowadays, it's still pretty good. 220 potency, physical damage, it's ranged, it has a good cast time, and it even does 30 seconds of paralysis as a nice little cherry on top. It's not as good, it's not as meta as Sonic Boom, but if you don't have Sonic Boom, this is far from a bad spell to use as your single target spam spell. Sleep, yay, more sleep. Except instead of a targeted AoE, it's a circle AoE, so it only hits the enemies that are directly around you, and then you'll get interrupted unless you use Surecast, and then all it does is put them to sleep so you can stand there staring at them or run away like a little bitch. Cool, yay, sleep. I love sleep. Sleep is amazing. Moving on. Okay, Eerie Soundwave. Carnivale fodder. As far as I know, this doesn't work on any other buffs that enemies give themselves at any other point in the game, so it's only really useful to get rid of specific buffs that the enemies give you in Master Carnivale. Otherwise, it's totally useless. I imagine that a lot of you probably forgot this existed. I certainly did, because, I mean, these days you don't even have to dispel those buffs, apart from a couple of the boss fights. All of the normal stages where the enemy give them buffs, you can just brute force and bowl over them with all of your level 80 spells, so... It's useful, low-level, Mass Carnivale. Apart from that, useless. Alrighty, Palm Cure. This is the only single-target healing spell that Blue Mage has, and for that reason, it just goes into always useful. It's not incredible. It's only 500 potency. It has a normal cast time. It's single-target, and it's only useful on Healer Mimic. Otherwise, it's only 100 potency, making it completely useless. But it's the only single-target heal that Blue Mage has, and for that reason, it's always useful because you have nothing else. You have nothing else to use. Gobskin, same situation as Palm Cure, the only barrier that Blue Mage has. The only one. Like, everything else is damage mitigation. Everything else is damage mitigation, even Diamondback. No other barriers. This is the only barrier that Blue Mage has. And it's not very good, honestly. It's only 250 potency, so it's pretty minuscule. It's also AoE, so it's not like an Adloquium versus a Sucker situation. It's just kind of okay, but it's all of the mitigation that Blue Mage has, so it's kind of that good by default. Like this is the only way you can survive some Savage raid wides is by using Gobskin, because otherwise you'll just get one shot by everything. So that about tells you the state of Blue Mage in high level Savage. But that's neither here nor there. It's the only barrier Blue Mage has, so for that reason, always useful. Okay, next up, Magic Hammer. Kind of torn here, but I'll stick in sometimes just because sometimes Candy Cane is the better choice. But it's just real good. It's 250 potency. It's got a fast cast time. It reduces it's an AoE attack. It reduces the magic stats of all of the enemies it hits for a few seconds. So it's a good source of mitigation versus most enemies. Let's be honest, because most enemies with big raid wides and whatnot do magic damage. And it also gives you some MP back. It's just a nice little spell. It's obviously not going to be contesting Blood Drain anytime soon. But if you just need a little bit of your MP back, Magic Hammer is right there waiting for you. It's fast, it's reliable, it's just real good. And the only reason it's not always useful is because sometimes you'll want to switch it out for something else, and sometimes it's better to use its brother Candy Cane. But otherwise, it's just a nice spell. Next up, a very funny spell, but for all the wrong reasons, a Veil. So this is the reverse of Paladin's cover, where rather than the Paladin selflessly sacrificing himself in order to protect you, this is you instead saying, hey, this is your problem now, and forcefully latching yourself onto one of your party members and getting them killed in your stead, which is absolutely hilarious. If you really want to screw with your friends, this is the way to do it, is play Blue Mage tank, and then right as the tank buster is about to come out, avail them, which is easier said than done because the range is trash. It's only like a couple yalms, so you'll need to get real up close to them anyway, which means you could probably just cleave them anyway, but yeah, that's a good way to make your friends angry, is by forcefully electing them as the new tank in this hour of need. But it is used in a couple of Savage fights for the off-tank to latch onto the main tank while the main tank diamondbacks through the tank busters. But otherwise, for the most part, for the vast majority of Blue Mage content, it's not super useful. It's basically only there for tank swap mechanics, and where you basically just say, no, you're both tanks now, and let the main tank deal with it. But yeah, that's all that really keeps it out of useless territory. But again, it is still very, very funny to think about just saying, hey, take this damage for me, and they can't do anything about it. Like they cannot remove the buff until you stop casting the spell. Or even that, I'm not sure, it's been a while since I've used it, so you might not even be able to take it off if you're the caster either. So, have fun, dumbass. Oh boy. Frog legs, where are you? Oh god. So, the amount of people that I've had to explain how this spell actually works to is far too high for it to be really acceptable. I mean, all the tooltip says is that it provokes nearby enemies. Now, that comes with a certain expectation, because there's only one provoke ability in the entire game, and that's Provoke, that all the tanks have, that lets you take aggro off somebody. This is an AoE Provoke. It has a cast time, and it is not a true Provoke. See, normal tank Provoke is a single target ability that gives you top aggro, and then also gives you a 25% boost, somewhere around there, boost to your aggro to let you hold on to aggro so that the other person doesn't just immediately steal it back from you, even if they have their tank stance on. Frog Legs, on the other hand, only gives you 1 extra point of aggro than the top aggro. So if somebody has 100 points of aggro and you use this to provoke the enemies that are attacking them, you get 101 aggro, which means that they will immediately steal it back from you, effectively rendering it moot. and unfortunately it doesn't say any of this in the tooltip, so you've got these poor new Blue Mage tanks wondering why they cannot keep aggro, even when they're spamming Provoke. It's because this Provoke is not Provoke. Traitor in frog's clothing. It is just bad, but unfortunately it's the only actual it's the only Provoke that Blue Mage has. And so, in certain situations where you have to get an enemy off of somebody else, you are required to use it. But it's still terrible. That's the thing, is that a lot of utility spells that Blue Mage has aren't very good, but they're all you have. So you have no choice but to use them. So yeah, it's absolutely terrible. It's an awful spell. It's terribly designed, but it's the only thing you have. So on multi-tank fights, it's a requirement, and so sometimes useful. Sonic Boom, the current meta single target spam spell for DPS and healers. It has no bells and whistles, and it actually does do less damage than Abyssal Transfixation, but it is lightning fast, like to the point where you almost can't cancel it when you push the button fast. And that's all it really needs to be. It's only 10 less potency than Abyssal Transfixation, and while it doesn't have that extra effect of paralysis, it is so fast. You were able to slide cast with ease with it. You can use it basically at any point. You will almost never be caught with your pants down because you started casting a spell, because it is just that fast. And that's all it needs to be, and that's why it is the best single target spam spell we have right now. And it will likely remain that way until we get something even faster or that does more damage in the same amount of time. Alright, Whistle. All it does is you cast it, and then it boosts your next spell cast, well, your next physical damaging spell cast by 80%, which is ludicrous, and it stacks with other stuff that does the same thing. So it's kind of funny how this spell is absolutely essential for DPS, in spite of the fact that it's only really used on 3 spells. Well, 2 spells, really. And that's just Triple Trident and Final Sting. But Triple Trident and Final Sting are just that powerful that this spell is an absolute necessity for DPS. And even then, it still works on Abyssal Transfixation, it still works on Sharpened Knife, it still works on Winged Reprobation. All physical damaging spells, if you have a second of downtime, you can boost them by 80% for free. And those spells are just that powerful, that Whistle by itself is just that powerful. Always, always useful on DPS. Alright, White Knight's Tour and Black Knight's Tour. Now, on paper, it's a cute idea. Basically, you use one spell that gives them bind, and then you use the other spell that gives them slow. And then you alternate between the 2 spells, and they do increased damage to the opposite spell's status. And being able to spam a couple 400 potency AoE hits is nothing to sneeze at. But the fact is that you have to waste 2 spell slots on this effect, and that the enemies eventually become immune to it, and the fact that you could just use one spell and get a better effect, and when the enemies are immune to it, or you don't take both spells, then it does less damage than most other AoE spells. So they're just not really worth using. They're not horrifically bad, but compared to some other stuff that's coming later, they're just not good, and they're definitely not worth 2 spell slots. Okay, level 5 Death. We'll put it in rarely useful. So, level 5 Death shares a cast time with its big brother Ultravibration. And on paper, it sounds like it would be better than Ultravibration because the enemies don't need to be frozen or petrified in order to kill them. However, this is a level 5 spell, just like Petrify, meaning that it only works on enemies with levels a multiple of 5, meaning, realistically, only enemies in level 50, 60, 70, etc. dungeons. Not only that, but it also has a chance of failing. Ultravibration, if the enemies are frozen or petrified, they are dead, plain and simple. Level 5 Death, on the other hand, the spell can just decide not to work on some of them, or hell, even all of them if you're stupid unlucky. And for that reason, it's just obviously not nearly as good. If this spell didn't have those requirements, it would be up here and Ultravibration would be down here, because you would need to use 2 spell slots on it. But Ultravibration is a guaranteed kill. Level 5 Death is a kill sometimes if you ask nicely and you were born under the right phase of the moon. I mean, the only real usage I can remember that it gets in higher level stuff is you use it to attempt to kill one of the dragon ads in Bahamut before it dive bombs and kills your healer. But even then, it doesn't work a lot of the time, so it fails at its one niche usage in one specific fight, and for that reason, rarely useful. But since it is still an instant kill spell that can sometimes work on some enemies, I had to put it in rarely useful instead of useless. Launcher. Maybe back in the day the spell was a bit better before you could do all the shenanigans in a post-ultravibration world, but nowadays not so much anymore. So use the spell. It costs 2500 MP per cast, so it will decimate your entire supply in just a couple casts, and then it hits all nearby enemies for either 10, 20, or 30, or 10, 20, 30, or 50% of their HP, and it's totally random. So you can hit all the enemies for 10% of your HP for 2500 MP per cast. So if you get lucky, it can decimate entire stacks of them, but otherwise it's just not very good. And in a post-ultravibration world, why would you even bother? Like, the only way this is ever getting any use is if everybody's screwed up and the enemies are now immune to being frozen. So the only thing that keeps it rarely useful is the fact that it does do some damage, and like in dungeons where the enemies can't be frozen, there's at least that asset. I think it does work on those enemies. I could be wrong, but I think it does. So if you remember exactly which dungeons and exactly which enemies are immune to freeze, it could be useful. But apart from that, just why bother? All you're going to do is just make yourself very mana poor very quickly. A Perpetual Ray. So, as far as single target spam spells go, there are definitely some worse ones. 220 potency, same cast time. I mean, obviously not as good as Abyssal Transfixation, but this one stuns. And the thing about this one is that it's kind of weird. It only stuns for a single second, so it's more of an interrupt than a stun. But, however, enemies do not become immune to it, is the thing. Like, it says on the tooltip that it ignores their stun resistance. It does not do that. You cannot stun enemies that cannot be stunned. Instead, it just makes it so you can spam this on them, and they will always be stunned for that 1 second. However, since it's single target, that means that it has limited usefulness. It's not going to be usurping Ram's voice anytime soon. But there are worse single target spam spells for that reason. And Cactguard. We'll stick it in rarely useful just to be consistent, but it's far from a bad spell per se. The only problem is that it's only good when your party is bad. So, first off, it's only useful on Tank Mimic. It's completely useless otherwise. On Tank Mimic, it's a 15% damage reduction, whereas on anything else, it's only 5, so completely useless. And it's a fast cast, and when you use it, it gives the target a couple seconds of 15% damage reduction. It's essentially just a Heart of Stone that you can spam. Only problem being is that you'll only get any use out of it if you know somebody's about to be taking damage on it. If you know people are going to be taking damage in a consistent basis, which means if you're partied up with a bunch of people that you know are going to be standing in the fire constantly, then you can save their bacon and potentially save the pull. However, if you're partied up with people who know what they're doing, this spell quickly becomes completely useless. Now, you could argue a lot of mitigation is like that, but the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of people who play Blue Mage do it casually in low-level stuff, dungeons, normal trials, normal raids. So throwing this into the mix is really good for those, but in higher level stuff, it's obviously completely useless. And so for that reason, we'll put it in rarely useful. Yeah, we'll stick with rarely useful just because... actually, fine. We'll stick it in sometimes useful just because, well, the average person who plays this game is really, really stupid. So anything that could put a stopgap between that stupidity and potentially costing the pull is a good thing. So sometimes useful. Revenge Blast. Now, this is a freaking weird spell. This one goes all the way at the bottom of rarely useful. It's probably one of the nichest spells that Blue Mage has. So, here's how it works. It is physical damage, it is melee range, and it is only 50 potency. So, 5 casts of Flying Sardine. Thing is, though, if you are below 20% health, which is a very, very low health amount, especially for a caster, it suddenly jumps up to 500 potency, and you can spam it for as long as you remain at that health amount. Problem being, though, is that you have to be in an extremely controlled environment to get it to go to that level, to get your health that low, keep it that low, not die, and be able to get the full use out of it. So, this spell is used in 2 fights in Blue Savage, those being O12 and E8. O12, you can use a very, very specific combination of mitigation to get your health down to just the right amount to be able to abuse it. Until you regen out of it, because unfortunately combat regen works against you when you're trying to use this spell, because you can just regen out and you won't know until suddenly one of your attacks does 50 damage. But, yeah, like there's no board or anything that tells you when the spell is ready, which I really think they should add, even though the spell is niche as all hell. And then in E8, you actually use another spell, Wild Rage, in order to get your health down to low enough in order to abuse it, because that fight sucks, and it's terrible for Blue Mage especially, and you want to be able to abuse this spell in order to skip as much of it as humanly possible. Otherwise, though, if you're not using it in an extremely controlled environment, you are just going to get yourself killed time and time and time and time again with no progress made. So, if you're planning on doing E8 or O12, then it's real good, and it's good for abusing in those fights and skipping a lot of bad mechanics. Otherwise, don't ever try to use it, because you'll just end up having to get scraped off the floor. Okay, another spell that is only good by virtue of it being the only one Blue Mage has, Exuviation. This is an AoE heal, so that actually does do the same potency healing as Stotrim if you're on Healer Mimic. So there's that at least. If you don't have Stotrim, that's another AoE heal that doesn't break the bank like White Wind does. But it is also an AoE Dispel. However, the AoE is only 5 yalms, melee range. So, or 6 yalms rather, but still, melee range. That means that you have to be in breath-smelling distance with your party in order to dispel them, and people don't realize that. And so people will be standing on all different corners of the arena, needing to be dispelled before they die. And so, rather than them coming to you, you'll instead have to run over to them and dispel them in order to make it so they do not die to whatever is currently killing them. It's an absolutely terrible spell for that reason. Terrible to use, makes Blue Mage Healer way more stressful than it needs to be. I mean, it's an AoE dispel, so it hits everybody at once, but they, again, need to be sniffing your farts in order to be able to hit them with it. So, if there was any other dispel for Blue Mage, it would probably be better than this one, but because it's the only one you have, and some fights you have to dispel people or they'll die, it's always useful by default. Still hate you, Exuviation. Reflux. It's another 220 potency single target spam spell, except it gives the target heavy and they can't resist it. So, cool, I guess. I mean, it's heavy, so they'll, just take an extra second to get to you in order to keep smacking you with auto attacks, but it's far from the worst single target spam spell you can use. Far from the best, but far from the worst, so it's just kinda whatever. If you don't have Sonic Boom and you don't have Abyssal Transfixation, you can use Reflux, I guess. It's fine. Now, onto a God tier spell, on the other hand, we have Devour. On tank, this spell is one of your bread and butter spells. And it's real simple. You use it, you do a 250 potency attack, and you get a boost to your max HP. And on Tank Mimic, it is practically permanent, because it lasts longer than it takes for this to come off cooldown. On Blue Mage Tank, which is really clunky, really squishy, and needs every single asset it can get its grubby paws on to survive, this spell is just real good. And it's also used in E12S because otherwise you'll E12S on everybody in E12S because otherwise you'll just die to all the Shockwave Pulsar AoE attacks, and yeah. So that's the state of Blue Mage Savage in the late endgame, is you need to use tank cooldowns on DPS, otherwise you'll just die to everything. Fun times. I can't wait to see how Pandemonium goes, where we need to bring freaking Diamondback and Diamondback every single AoE. Oh lord. If you want to be a really good Blue Mage healer, bring Condensed Libra with you. It's just free damage. You cast this spell, and the boss gets a couple new elemental weaknesses with a 5% bonus damage to those weaknesses hit, including physical. Now, it is random. It's a combination of either fire, wind, lightning, water, earth, ice, and then physical for each of the 3 debuffs the spell can give at random. But it's still 5% free damage from those types, and if you manage to roll Physical Libra in short order, that is a massive boost to your overall damage because all of your strongest spells are physical. So, if you want to be a good Blue Mage healer, if you want to wow people in Party Finder by doing more than the bare minimum, bring Condensed Libra. Another real good spell, Serpenaka. It's a big, freaking wide AoE attack that you spam 4 times in a row for its max damage, and then you let it recharge. It feels real good to use, it is super powerful, and as a bonus, it's also really good for grabbing enemies as tank. You just you have 4 charges of it, you can use it to grab all of the different trash mobs and bring them all to you. Alongside Shock Strike and Feather Rain / Eruption, you'll want for naught when it comes to grabbing mobs as a tank. Pro tip. And on top of that, it's real good for damage, it is instant cast. Like, yeah, you do have to spam it 4 times in a row in order to get the full damage out of it, but there's no penalty for not doing it. So if you get caught off guard and you need to suddenly cast something else, it's not going to break the bank. You still have those charges, and now you just have to wait for it to recharge again. It's just real good. It does big damage. Is Quasar a bad spell? No. However, compared to its other thing that it shares the cooldown with, it is not even close. I mean, it's far from a bad spell. 300 potency for all nearby enemies. I mean, that's less than Glass Dance, and Glass Dance got power crept out ages ago. In fact, screw it. Sometimes useful, or rarely useful rather. It's only 300 potency, not super great. It's got a decently big radius, and it doesn't need a target. But compared to its big brother that we're going to get to in a second, it's not even close. I mean, at least you get to go and see Sophia in order to get the spell. So there's that at least. You can at least lick your wounds alongside that pleasing view. J-Kick, now we're talking. One of the most fun abilities that Blue Mage has. One of only 2 gap closers that Blue Mage has. 300 potency physical damage, instant cast. Lets you launch yourself into the enemy, slam down, feel like a badass, grow Brew Justice's wings, just for that extra bit of aura, as the kids say. It's just real good, and a cornerstone of the Mood Flute opener. You would not be able to get to the boss fast enough, or you'd have to walk up to the boss and then start your Mood Flute opener in order to get everything out. But J-Kick says, no, take this, King, and suddenly you're launched into the boss, 300 potency, and you're able to immediately fire off your entire tirade, and it's awesome. I love you, J-Kick. Triple Trident, another of the stab Blue Mage spells that does way more damage than it probably should, but you don't hear me complaining because it's funny. You cast this, and you hit the enemy 3 times, doing 150 potency each, and it can be boosted by everything that boosts physical damage, meaning that altogether you can pump it up to about 1300 potency every single time you use it. And it's just real good. It does big damage, it does physical damage, it is just real good. Only really useful on DPS, naturally, because you need all the boosters in order to make it what it is. But on DPS, whoo mama, it's amazing. Now this spell is probably one of the funniest spells, because it's literally only used to boost this spell. Tinkle's only usage is boosting Triple Trident. And Triple Trident is that powerful that it is worth wasting an entire spell slot, even in high tier Savage, just for this shitty little AoE attack that gives you a buff. So if you try to use this as an actual attack, you will fail horribly because it is pathetically weak. Only 100 potency with a 50% fall off, which is horrifyingly low. But I mean, it's AoE at least, so you can hit all of those enemies with a 50 potency attack. Amazing. But then it gives you a boost to your next physical attack cast, and I'm pretty sure it stacks multiplicatively, and I'm pretty sure it affects all 3 hits. So all together with Whistle, this, and then Moon Flute as well, you're looking at 1350 potency, I believe it was, for a single usage of Triple Trident, which is ludicrous, and it's so powerful that even the big blue nerds recommend wasting an entire spell slot on this shitty little lightning AoE attack just to boost this spell. It's hilarious. Okie dokie, next up, Tatami Geishi. I mean, it's another AoE stun. Cool. For 3 seconds, except it doesn't go through stun resistance. Cool. And for whatever reason, it does unaspected damage, so I mean, you think it'd do physical damage, but no, it's unaspected for some reason, even though you're literally throwing straw mats at people, but sure. It's not real good, honestly, but I mean, it's 220 potency, so it does damage at least. And again, it's funny that you're throwing floor mats at people, but apart from that, compared to some of the other stuff, it's not real good, especially for an AoE attack in a post-ultravibration world. Cold Fog. A very, very powerful spell that is unfortunately very, very frustrating to use. This spell is really powerful. All you have to do is cast it and take damage, and then suddenly you are able to spam 400 potency attacks for the next 15 seconds, rather. 15 seconds of being able to spam 400 potency ranged freezing attacks. I mean, the freeze doesn't really matter all that much, but that's big damage. That's a lot of freaking damage. Only problem being is that the status that you need to get hit while under only lasts for 5 seconds. So basically, it's way harder to get this spell off than it needs to be. Like, I get that it needs to be a risk-reward sort of thing, but I swear that some bosses will delay their attacks in order to keep it so this doesn't proc, because it's just that strong. But a 5-second interval to take damage, with the 2 seconds that it takes to cast it in order to get the buff up in the first place, means that it is way more frustrating to use than it probably needs to be, but I suppose that's the only thing balancing it out, so sometimes useful, because sometimes you just aren't taking damage, and sometimes it's better to swap it out for something else. But still, 400 potency, a lot of damage. Alright, so another spell that's only good by the sake of being the only one you have, Stotrum. It's an AoE heal. I mean, it's an AoE attack that's centered on you, that's really crappy and you shouldn't use, but under the effects of Healer Mimic, it becomes an AoE heal for 300 potency, which is garbage, but it's the only AoE heal that either isn't a pathetically tiny barrier and that won't break the bank, or that isn't a long cooldown. So, if your back is to the wall and you need to spam healing but you don't have the MP, or if you don't have the MP, or if you're at low health, then you have to use Stotrum. So even though it isn't a very good spell at all, by default it's always useful because it's all you've got. Blue Mage Healer really gets the shaft. Okay, Saintly Beam. The epitome of rarely useful. This spell is only 100 potency against normal enemies, which is pathetically terrible. I mean, it doesn't have fall off, so there's that, but it's still really bad. However, against undead enemies, that suddenly shoots up to 500 potency, the same potency as fricking Revenge Blast, except you can be at full health and it's an AoE attack with no fall off. However, because so few enemies are undead, and because they happen so sporadically, most of the time it's naturally not worth using. However, in Tamtara Hard, where basically every single enemy in the place is undead, this thing becomes a freaking base cannon. Back a few years ago, when there was a Mogtome event going on, and the Tamtara Hard was one of the dungeons you could run, people would just run Blue Mage and just spam Saintly Beam the entire dungeon, because basically every single enemy in that dungeon is undead. Everything was taking 500 potency damage from absolutely everything. It's a menace. But apart from that, unless you know exactly which enemies are undead and are swapping it in and out as necessary, it's not worth the hassle, unfortunately, which sucks, because it's really fun to use. Uh-oh, stinky. Oh, God. Feculent Flood. Feculent literally means poop, by the way, so this spell is literally spraying shit at people, which is very funny, I do admit. However, as far as usefulness goes, it's 220 potency, cone AoE. Or no, line AoE, which is weird because the actual spell itself is a cone, but whatever. So it's earth damage, so it's one of like 3 spells that does earth damage, but apart from that, just a crappy AoE attack in a post-ultravibration world. But again, the fact that you're spraying shit at people means that it's at least kind of funny, so top of rarely useful tier at least. Blue Mage. Angel Snack. It's just a big freaking heal, and then it's also an AoE regen. It's the only regen that Blue Mage has that isn't a terrible gimmick that's only useful in treasure dungeons, but we'll get to that in a minute. It's just real good. Not much else to say to it. It's a big AoE regen. What else do you want from me? Jelonian Gate. Now, the 10 paragraphs of text that accompany it on its tooltip might turn some people away, but this is actually a really fun tank cooldown that you can use. So it's real simple. You cast it, you channel the ability, and you bring up the titular gate, and then you take 20% reduced damage while it's active. You have to stop attacking and stop moving, obviously, or else it cancels the spell. If you take 30% of your health and damage, then you can then retaliate with a big 1000 potency AoE attack, if you're on tank mimic, that is. Which is crazy, but it's only there to really refund the damage that you lost standing there looking like an idiot. But it's one of very, very few mitigations that Blue Mage has, and as such, tank desperately needed it, and so always useful. There it is. Okay, next up, Rose of Destruction. It's very simple. It's just a single target 400 potency attack with a 30-second cooldown. Only problem with it being that it has knockback, but in most single target scenarios, the enemies will be immune to knockback, so it's not really an issue. This is the first spell that you'll switch off if you need something more utility focused for raiding, but otherwise it's just good. It's 400 potency, 30-second cooldown. It's just good. But please, for the love of God, do not use it on trash and knock people out of range of ultravibration. Please, thank you. Okay, Blaze. Say it with me, folks. 220 potency AoE with 50% fall off, except this time it's a circle again, and it does ice damage, because even though it's called Blaze, and they make a joke about it in the frickin' tooltip. Great. And that's about all I can say about it. Cool. Mustard Bomb. I'll stick it in... Screw it, we'll stick in rarely useful. So on paper, it sounds cool. I mean, another 220 potency AoE attack. This time it's a circle around your target. Cool. Only thing being is that it does give a dot if enemies have been hit by peripheral synthesis in the last couple seconds. Because peripheral synthesis gives the lightheaded debuff. Only problem being is that lightheaded only lasts for like 4 seconds. So you only get really one shot to put out this AoE dot, and at the same time, peripheral synthesis also combos with its own debuff and doubles in potency for those hits. So you could put up a dot, or you could just hit them with 400 potency hits instead. I mean, this is probably better over a longer engagement, but like you're only going to be using AoE on trash mobs that actually will take the debuff if you have screwed up your ultravibrations. So not really worth using outside of like I forget. Does this work in treasure dungeons? I think it does, but I think it's still really not worth the spell slot because you've got to prioritize survival over everything else in treasure dungeons. So it's not a bad spell, but it's just not really worth the spell slot, honestly. Dragon Force. It's just a tank cooldown, except it has a cast time, so it's worse, but it's the only normal tank cooldown that Blue Mage has. It doesn't require any channeling, doesn't require any paralysis, doesn't have any massive mana costs, nothing like that. You use this, you take 40% less damage, which at the time, when this was first released, that was the most powerful tank cooldown in the game until all the tanks got 40% with Dawn Trail. But it's just a tank cooldown. The only downside being is that you need to learn more than 100 freaking spells to get your hands on this incredibly essential piece of tanking gear. So if you want to tank with any amount of efficiency as a Blue Mage, you gotta learn more than 100 freaking spells, which is ludicrous, but whatever. Still a good spell, though. Ethereal Spark, an absolutely nothing spell that I'm not going to waste much breath on. It's an AoE dot that sucks, and it does no damage, and I mean, the devs didn't care, so why the hell should I? It's just bad. Hydro Pull. Now we're talking. This is basically just the better version of the Dragon's Voice, in that it's just a big, massive circle AoE around you that does big damage. It does more damage than Dragon's Voice. And on top of that, it also pulls enemies towards you, which makes it much easier to freeze them. This works great in dungeons, and it also works great in Fates as well, because Fate enemies aren't immune to being frozen or being immune to being pulled in. So you walk into the middle of a Fate, you pull everything in, you swift cast Ram's Voice, freeze everything, one-shot them, win the entire Fate, and then you walk away as some people cheer and some people boo. It's incredible. And even just by itself, it does decent damage, so it's not a total waste of a slot to bring it, and the radius is so gargantuan that in some fights, like especially the second boss of Amirite or the first boss of Troya, for example, well, when you're able to get there anyway, when Blue Mage gets to level 90, that is, you can just stand in the center of arena and just spam this over and over, and all the enemies will get hit by it, and it's just real good. Nothing much else to say, really. On the flip side, though, we have this. Malediction of Water. Yeah, I feel very maledicted against whenever somebody uses this shit. On paper, it already doesn't look very good. It does only 200 potency, so it's already worse at doing damage than all of these. Not only is it knockback, so it's just Protean Wave, but also, not only does it knock back enemies, it also knocks back your party members. This spell is literally only useful for griefing. You could literally push your party members off cliffs into death walls and into AoEs with this spell, and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, yes, it doesn't work all the time, and I'm pretty sure the knockback effect only activates when they're in combat, but still, you could legitimately grief an entire Blue Mage party by equipping this, and then right when everyone's about to win, you just push them all into the death wall. Like, you could legitimately be an honest-to-God monster with this spell, and the only reason people don't is because Party Finder Blue Mage players are too stupid to know how to kneecap people intentionally, only accidentally. So, yeah, if you use the spell, you are an active detriment to your entire party, including yourself. Bravo. And worst part is that this is one of 2 spells like this, but we'll get to that in a second. Holy shit, what were they thinking? Choco Meteor. I don't know why all of the bad Party Finder Terrorizers have been using this as their spam spell lately, but here it is. It's not very good by itself, and it's only really useful in the overworld. It does become 300 potency with your Chocobo out, but naturally, you can only have your Chocobo out in the overworld. So it's only really useful for Fates, essentially. Fates and Hunts, I guess. So, I'm almost tempted to put it in useless, but it's at least good for fates, so there's at least that. But otherwise, no, don't use this as your spam spell, please. I know it sounds funny, I know it looks kind of cool, but please use something else. Metro Magic. On DPS, you'll always want to have this active, because it's just a big freaking burst of damage. More than, with the boost altogether, I believe it's 800 potency. No, it's more than 800 potency with just bristle, I think. Way more than that. In fact, how much is this? Doesn't say on the wiki, but it's just a big frickin' burst of damage. You boost it with bristle, you do it in your mood flute opener, and it's just a big fricking burst of damage. And that's all there is to say about it. It shares a cooldown with Dragon Force and Angel Snack, but you wouldn't be using those on DPS anyway. It's just good. Peripheral Synthesis. Now, as far as 220 potency AoE attacks with 50% damage reduction go in a pulsed ultravibration world, it's still not amazing, considering that most AoE encounters are just going to get one shot, but this is probably the best AoE attack just for damage's sake. Because not only is it physical damage, meaning they can be boosted by Whistle by 80%, but also it applies the lightheaded debuff for 5 seconds. Enemies that are hit by this with the lightheaded debuff active, the attack does double damage, or slightly less than double damage, all the way up to 400 potency, which is nothing to sneeze at. Now, it is still an AoE attack with all the caveats that comes with, but as far as AoE attacks specifically for damage in those instances where you need to use one, this is probably the best one in the game right now. And so, sometimes useful is where it goes. Okay, both ends. Is it a bad spell? No, but compared to Nightbloom, it's not even a question. It is a 600 potency physical damage to all nearby enemies with no fall-off, which is great, and it does do more damage than Nightbloom at first glance. However, that 60 second 75 potency dot that Nightbloom gives kind of seals the deal. This is the biggest example of 2 spells from a dungeon and a trial could not be any more different in terms of power. Is it a bad spell? No, but just use Nightbloom. Okay, next up, Phantom Flurry. Phantom Flurry is kind of weird in the sense that it's not really used for its intended purpose anymore. Basically, if you didn't know, this, as well as another spell that's coming later, how they work as an attack is they just give you a buff that allow you to keep attacking. What that means in practice, though, is that you can use this spell outside of your Moon Flute window when you're already in Waning Nocturne, when you're not supposed to be able to keep attacking. So, you do all of your other stuff in your Moon Flute opener, and then you use this right at the end with 1 second left, and you get an extra 5 seconds of uninterrupted attacks, provided you stand still, of course, that Waning Nocturne doesn't stop you from doing. Apocalypsis works the same way, but obviously you won't be able to use Being Mortal in that case. So it's not really, it's fine as an AoE attack by itself, and the finisher follow-up that you can't use in Waning Nocturne does still do a decent chunk of damage in an AoE situation, but post-ultravibration world, remember, so you're not really going to be seeing many AoE situations, and so most of the time it's just used to extend your Moon Flute opener by a few seconds while some buffs are still active, which is kind of weird and kind of sucks, because it's kind of a badass spell, but what can you do, right? Nightbloom. This was the trendsetter for big AoE nuke spells that get on your bar and stay there. I mean, not much else to say to it. It's a big AoE explosion that puts a 60-second 75 potency dot on everything it hits. Even just in single target during your Moon Flute opener, it is crazy strong, and once it's on your bar, doesn't matter what role you're playing, it stays there. And not much else to say about it. You push one button, you do big damage, brain go wee, end of story, you move on. Goblin Punch. The best single target spam spell in the game for tanks specifically. Because not only do you have to be in front of the boss in order to do its full damage, but you also have to have Mighty Guard on. So even though, with all of the caveats met, it is 320 potency each, making it far and away the best, you have that 40% damage reduction from Mighty Guard cutting that in half. So it's really just a consolation prize for tanks, because it allows you to have an instant cast attack that then lets you react a bit better to incoming attacks for yourself. It's mainly just a placeholder, because high-level tank basically just comes down to Goblin Punch, Blood Drain, and Diamondback a lot of the time. It's a thankless role, but somebody's got to do it, and it's not going to be me, that's for sure. I do play Blue Mage tank and low-level casual stuff, but you could not pay me to tank Savage shit. Like tanking Bahamut as a Blue Mage No thanks, I'll save that for somebody more masochistic, thanks. Speaking of masochism, right round. Oh god. So, we have Malediction of Water. A terrible spell that even the worst Blue Mage players in the world do not use for how bad it is. Either that or just because they can't read. And then Square Enix goes into their hidey hole and they think, we need a new set of spells from Shadowbringers. There's gotta be something real cool. And they think, some spells from Hades maybe. Maybe To the Limit from Warrior of Light to let them use the LB bar that sits there taunting them since fricking Realm Reborn. And then they think, I've got it. Right fricking round. And somehow, it's even worse. So, just like Malediction of Water, it has a pathetically low amount of damage. It does physical damage, but who the hell cares? 110 potency with no fall off. Who cares? 2 procs of Warrior's Damnation does the same thing. Amazing. But then, knockback. Not only to enemies, but to your party members. And not in a line AoE that you could maybe dodge. In a circle around you. If you stand anywhere near somebody who is using this spell, you are going to get tossed away. Meaning that your spell is going to get interrupted, which means if you were casting something with a long cast time, you are going to be infuriated, and worst case scenario, you are going to get flung into an AoE off a cliff or into a death wall and die instantly. Because people cannot read their tooltips and do not understand what all party members means. Holy shit, what were they thinking? And the fact that I've actually seen people use in Party Finder. And the fact that they genuinely do not understand what they're doing wrong when you tell them not to spam this spell means that people genuinely cannot read 3 lines of text without their eyes glazing over anymore. Holy shit, please do not ever use the spell, I beg of you. Bottom of useless tier. Chiltron. The best of the retaliation spells, still terrible though. In a post-ultravibration world, the only enemies that you're going to be getting consistently attacked by are bosses. And yeah, sure, it's 100 potency, great. That's at least double Warrior's Vengeance. Less than double of Warrior's Damnation, I believe, but I could be wrong. I can't remember the potency. The wasted GCD that it takes to cast it on a boss is not going to be refunded by the amount of damage that you could have saved by just goblin punching twice. So why even bother? And it's only good on Tank Mimic as well. It's only 50 potency. It's only 50 potency on DPS. So just more than Ice Spikes, I think. What was Ice? So slightly better than only 10 potency better than Ice Spikes in single targets in single target on DPS. Anybody outside Tank Mimic. Oh god, what were they thinking with these retaliation spells? They make spells that so often that are just not worth using, not because they have terrible gimmicks to them, but because they just don't do any damage. So like, why? Why would you waste a GCD and a spell slot on this when you can just Goblin Punch and do more damage? In a post-ultravibration world where you're never, ever, ever getting attacked by trash mobs. Just, pointless. Garbage. Rehydration. Pretty simple spell. You cast it has a long cast time, but you can swift cast it. And it's a 600 potency self-heal. And it doesn't come with the caveat of doing massive amounts of aggro like White Wind. So, in multi-tank fights, it is absolutely essential for being able to heal yourself as a tank. And even on other roles, you shouldn't bring it along on other roles because there are better uses of that spell slot, but it's a decent tank spell. It heals you, and that's about it. It's just fine. Another spell that is just really good, and that's about it, Breath of Magic. It's 120 potency AoE dot that lasts for 60 seconds that can be boosted by all of the damage boosters. And so it just adds a lot of ticking damage on top of the boss, on top of everything else that's going on. Just real good. Only downside being is that it can be overwritten by anybody, which means that Jerry Jackass with no buffs can overwrite your supercharged version of it, which kind of sucks, but if you're not playing with Brainless Apes, it's real good. Wild Rage. Do I even bother with this? I would say rarely useful because it does have one niche use, but no, one niche use in a single fight does not make something not useless in my eyes. So, Wild Rage. 500 potency AoE physical damage with 50% fall off, which means it can be boosted by 80% to an impressive amount, which is fine. I mean, it's got a 5-second cast time, so... Yeah, it's got a 5-second cast time, so you're not going to be using it in any serious capacity outside of swift casting. But it is used in E8S in order to abuse Revenge Blast. Because using this twice, it it does consume 50% of your max HP each time, but you cast it once, you regenerate a single tick's worth of health, and then you can cast it again, which brings you all the way down to single-digit health, and then you can spam a Revenge Blast for the most amount of time, but only in that fight, because there isn't a lot of outgoing damage, you can abuse it, and because you need as much damage as possible to skip as much of that fight as possible, because it's terrible and I hate it. But otherwise, no, don't use this in any serious capacity. You're just going to get yourself killed and waste people's reses and mana. Just don't use it. Heat Belt. Terrible. I mean, it's got one niece usage, but only as a combo tool, and so it goes down here in useless otherwise. I mean, even still, it's only one real usage. So it's an AoE dot, it's absolutely pathetic damage, it's only meant to be combo, just like Aqua Breath, and as such, it's just not very good. In fact, no, it's terrible. And only with its other spell can it even come close to even resembling good, and only in one specific kind of content. So, Deep Clean is the combo tool in question. And I'll stick it in... we'll stick in Rarely Useful. Yeah, we'll stick in Rarely Useful. So, by itself, another 220 potency AoE attack with a 50% fall off in a post-ultravibration world. I mean, the damage is fine. It's a targeted AoE around your it's an AoE around your target, which is good. It's for coverage or whatever. Thing is, though, if you hit an enemy with the Begrimed debuff from Peat Pelt, you remove the debuff and instead get yourself a stack of a stacking regen buff. That stacks up to 6 times, up to a 300 potency regen on yourself. Only problem being is that once that timer starts, it is ticking until the end. You cannot reset the timer. You can only increase the amount of stacks you have. So if you have 5 seconds left and you suddenly get 5 more stacks from 1, you still only have 5 more seconds with those stacks of regen, and then you have to reapply Begrimed and reapply Deep Clean. And the only time that is ever useful in a post-ultravibration world is in treasure dungeons. And because treasure dungeons, not only do you need as much survivability as humanly possible to solo them as Blue Mage, but also because the enemies cannot be frozen in there. So you can't freeze the enemies, so while they are still attacking you, you can instead dot them up and then clean them off and get that stacking regen, which is an absolute necessity for some enemy layouts, because otherwise you will not be able to survive. You just do not have the healing and mitigation necessary to tank it. But apart from treasure dungeons, it's just another lame AoE attack with not much going for it. So in treasure dungeons, it's real good. In fact, it's absolutely necessary to do 70 plus ones with this, but otherwise, don't bother. Just use any other AoE attack. Oh boy, another spell that absolutely baffles me in its existence. Ruby fricking Dynamics. A level 80 trial spell that people are addicted to using because they can't read. So, 220 potency, massive 12 yalm cone in front of you. Sounds pretty alright at least. It's got a decent range on it, so even though it doesn't have any extra effect, it should at least be up here somewhere, right? Well, no. Because it has a 30-second cooldown. A cooldown that it shares with Chelonian Gate and Rose of Destruction. So, it is essentially doing what all of these shitty, lame AoE spells do, but worse. The only thing it has going for it is that it has a slightly faster cast time and a slightly larger range. But who even cares in a post-ultravibration world? Not me, that's for damn sure. It is quite literally, unapologetically useless as a spell. There is no situation where it is worth using this spell as opposed to any other AoE attack in the game. And the problem is that people don't understand that, and they keep using it in trials, and they wonder why the trial takes 10 minutes because they're using this crap and not something actually useful. And you get it from a level 80 trial with a damage check. Oh, it's so bad. In fact, funny story, actually. I had a meeting, at the end of one of our sessions, my Blue Mage Static and I told everyone that they absolutely needed to bring Ruby Dynamics for the next session. That it was absolutely vital for us to clear Bahamut, which was the fight we were progging at the time, because a couple people didn't have all the spells. And so the next week, one of my static members approaches me and he asks, "Bro, are you sure this spell is that useful?" And after I had finished laughing hysterically, I had to explain to him that no, this spell is quite literally the epitome of absolutely, completely, and totally useless. And so it's kind of become a running gag in my static where we say, when we don't get the clear, we just come back and say, okay, next week we gotta make sure we bring Ruby Dynamics. That way we'll clear for sure. Oh, dear lord. And that's all this spell is. A sick fricking joke at the expense of every single Blue Mage player who wanted something better from Shadowbringers. This is all you get. Sorry. Try again next time in 2 years, buckaroo. Another baffling spell, Divination Rune. Whoop-de-doo. On the surface, it sounds pretty good. It's an AoE attack, it does more damage than Blood Drain, and it's from a trial, so you'd think it'd be better than Blood Drain. You know, a level 73 trial as opposed to a level 15 random mob in one of the starting areas. Should probably have a better version of the spell, right? Well, no. Not only does it do pitiful damage for an AoE attack, only 100 potency with no fall-off, but also, it only replenishes 200 MP per target hit, meaning that in order to outpace Blood Drain on a single target, you have to hit 4 targets with Divination Rune, something that does not happen with Blue Mage, ever. The only time you can ever even make a case for this spell's existence is, again, treasure dungeons, but again, you just need to manage your MP better if that's the case. Don't just spam White Wind and expect to get through everything. Oh my god, and of course, since it doesn't mention this in the tooltip, people use it all the time thinking that they're getting their MP back, that they're being sly, but no. You use this on a single target, and you are only breaking even. This spell costs the same amount. This spell costs the same amount to cast as what you're getting back. You are only breaking even. So yeah, unless you're in the incredibly uncommon scenario of having 4 targets to hit with this spell and being in such dire MP straits that you would ever even consider it, no, this spell is worthless. Do not ever, ever, ever use it. This one just confuses me. Dimensional Shift, another level 80 spell, is basically a slightly better yet slightly worse version of Launcher. The better version is that it always does 30% of the enemy's damage, always. Only problem being is that it takes 5 seconds to cast. So instead of decimating your MP and having to rely on RNG to kill the enemies, you instead have to waste the best years of your life waiting for the spell to actually go off. So, no, I'd even go so far as to say that it's flat out useless. Now, there is one usefulness that I found for it, and that's that in the final trash pull of Malika's Well, there are those golems that just sit there doing nothing for a full minute that are immune to being frozen. You can just stand in the middle of them and spam this a couple times in order to kill them before they can even get up. But apart from that one specific pull in one specific dungeon, in one specific expansion, this spell is beyond useless, which sucks because it feels awesome and it looks awesome. But unfortunately, it is just plain terrible. Okay, Conviction Mercado. It's not as good as Peripheral Synthesis as far as a pure DPS-focused AoE attack, but even though it is just another 220 potency, 50% fall-off, post-ultravibration, yada yada yada, is that it does actually combo with another spell that you'll basically always have on you, at least on DPS and healers, that's coming in a second, where you use that spell, you get a buff, and then this becomes 400 potency for its next usage, which means that you don't have to worry about debuff shenanigans in order to be able to get that extra damage. So you can actually get the extra damage out of it on single target if you play it correctly. It does have limited usefulness, and a lot of the time you'd be better off using something else instead, but as far as pure DPS-focused stuff, specifically for bosses, it's alright. And I do have a soft spot for it because I think it looks really cool, and I think it's a fun little combo that you can do. I mean, it's just bonus damage. It's not any gimmicky nonsense. And so, probably not as good as Peripheral Synthesis in terms of its intended usage, but as far as an extra little 400 potency ability that you can throw off when you have nothing better to do, it's pretty good. Another baffling spell, Force Field. Oh joy. Oh dear lord. So, picture this. You're a Blue Mage tank main. You have so few reasons to live. This is all the mitigation you get. You get Dragon Force, you get Diamondback, you get Chelonian Gate. None of them are particularly incredible except for Diamondback. And even then, that one just makes it so you can't do damage and waste all of your MP. And so you think, oh boy, I finally get another tank cooldown. What's it gonna be? And it turns out to be one of the worst freaking spells Blue Mage has. Probably bottom 3 at least. So on paper, you think, okay, so It gives you... you don't even need to be in tank mimic for it. It only lasts 10 seconds, which isn't ideal, but... And then you realize, oh yeah, it's 50% mitigation, but only for one damage type. Either physical or magical. Completely random. So you cast this spell, and it has a 50% chance of doing nothing. Essentially. Unless you are being attacked by enemies that are both using physical and magical, which is uncommon in dungeons, and is only really common in treasure dungeons. And even then, sometimes it's not even, sometimes it'll be all physical or all magical. This tank cooldown that you have to waste a spell slot for that only lasts 10 seconds. This is the final spell that you get, that you'll need 120 spells learned in order to learn this spell. And it has a 50% chance of doing nothing. And that just about sums up some of these spells in a nutshell. 120 spells learned, and your prize is a 50% chance of actually being useful. What a freaking joke. Okay, bit of a palate cleanser. Winged Reprobation. On DPS and healers at least, it's just real good. It is a fast, physical damage AoE spell, 300 potency, 50% fall off, and you can spam it 4 times in a row. It gets boosted by physical damage boosters, and then, as a fun little bonus on top, when you've used up all 4 charges, then it powers up Conviction Marcato for another 400 potency attack. It's just real good. It's fast, it's AoE, it does a lot of damage, it's just real good. Only downside being is that you have to go into Crown of the Immaculate with the party of blue mages, and people love to stand in the bad and love to ignore the ads on that fight, so you'll wipe multiple times, and then you'll want to bash your head against the nearest wall. And then we get right back to the shit. What is this? Laser Eye. Not only do you have to get it from the absolute worst normal raid in the entire game, where people will be getting themselves killed left, right, and center, and then you'll wipe, and then you'll have to go through the entire freaking stupid-ass memory section cutscene again, having to listen to stupid Nomura nonsense talking about memories. And did I mention memories? And what do you get in return? You get a shitty AoE attack with knockback. Amazing. I mean, at least this one doesn't knock your party members back, but it's still knockback from the target, meaning that you're just going to knock some of the enemies away, some of them toward you, and so essentially the effect of the knockback is only about 50% because all of the enemies around your target are just going to be knocked back in random directions. Some of them away, which means they'll miss one auto attack, and some of them towards you, which means they'll just be able to get right back to attacking you scot-free. Amazing. Dear Lord, what on earth were they thinking with these Shadowbringer spells? They're either some of the best or some of the worst in the game, and how could they think this was acceptable, man? 2 knockback spells in the same expansion. Why? Okay, another palate cleanser. Candy Cane. Right up here with its brother, and it has the exact same effect as Magic Hammer. It's a fast AoE attack, and it gives you your MP back, except it reduces physical damage instead of magic damage, which does mean that it's a bit more situational, as most raid-wide attacks end up being magic, but that still does mean that it has its niche. In some fights with a lot of physical damage, it's still real good, and it's just a fast AoE attack that gives you MP back. It's just good. Mortal Flame. Now, there have been permanent dots in the game before, but none that the player could use. This is the first one. And it's very simple. It's a very weak dot, only 40 potency by default. It can be boosted by Bristle and Moonflute and all the other stuff to about 100 something. But it's permanent. You place this on at the start of the fight, and it lasts for the entire fight on that target. The only time where it gets even a little bit less, and where it only gets a little bit less, is in multi-boss fights, and even then, you can just place it on both of them in some cases. It's a permanent dot. It is a constant stream of damage that cannot be dispelled unless the target completely changes. It's just real good. And speaking of spells that are just real good, Sea Shanty. We'll put in sometimes useful just because sometimes you'll be wanting to take this off in favor of something more utility focused, but otherwise, I mean, it's a big AoE nuke. It's 500 potency, no fall off, instant cast, and as a fun little caveat, if it's raining, then it doubles. 1,000 potency with no fall off, all nearby targets, which is ludicrous, but there are only like 2 or 3 dungeons in the entire game where it's raining, and I'm not sure if it even works in there because dungeons and trials and whatnot often have unique weather. So realistically, that's only going to be happening in the overworld, so fates and treasure dungeons basically, but still, fun little thing, and again, it's an instant damage nuke. You get what you pay for. Another case of it not being a bad spell, but being inferior to its counterpart. Still, it's real cool though. Apocalypsis. So technically, Apocalypsis does do more damage than Being Mortal. However, you need to stand still and hit the entire thing, which means not using any other spells. So while it does do more damage than Being Mortal, you effectively lose more damage because Being Mortal is instant cast, whereas this has you standing still doing nothing else for 10 seconds. Is it badass? Absolutely. Does it make you feel like a freaking god? Absolutely. Can it be used in certain circumstances, like you can use it at the end of your Moonflute opener, and in the exact same vein as Phantom Flurry, in order to beam for an extra 10 seconds as opposed to kick for an extra 5. That's actually used in the Gavel Skip strat for Brew Justice, where one person kills the Steam Regulators with it. But unfortunately, if you're going for pure damage, if you're going for purely damage, pure utility, then Being Immortal is obviously going to be the way to go. And on top of that, you get interrupted at any point. You have to move, you take damage, you die, and all of that damage is wasted. So, is it super fun to use? Is it badass? Absolutely. Is it as good as Being Mortal? Not a chance. Still real good, though. And a bit of an anticlimactic end to all of it, but we've got Being Mortal. It's just a big, fat, 800 potency, AoE damage nuke, instant cast, whole shebang, blinds you and everyone else who doesn't have their party effects turned off, boosted by Moonflute, all that sort of fun stuff, 50% fall off, and yeah, that's about it. You push a button, it does big damage, you scorch your retinas out, and you do it again 2 minutes later. And I know that's kind of an anticlimactic way to end things off, but that's every single Blue Mage spell, apart from a couple that I couldn't rank. Alrighty, so I'm very tired now. I've been talking for a couple hours. My throat's kind of hoarse, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you at least found some insight into some of this as a new Blue Mage player, or you just came here to laugh at the bad spells. That's fine too. Again, thank you for watching, and hopefully this video does well. as niche as Final Fantasy XIV limited job tier list spells are concerned. And yeah, alright, see you guys.